today. We'll set it up as the regular format. He's going to introduce himself and tell you a little about himself in far more interesting ways than I could, so I'll let him do that. And then as you are thinking of questions, raise your hand and we'll take the list. He is open to questions, and also I told him that he should decide what he's interested in, what he's willing to respond to and whatnot. So I will give you John Reed.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. How are you? Good. It's indeed an honor, a privilege, and a blessing to be here with you this morning. For you are the most important person in the room, not me, because you are the youth and you are the future leaders of this world. So it is an honor to come to meet you, to spend some time with you, to look into your faces, and hope that I can impart some information and hopefully inspiration before the time exceeds. I want to thank Becky, Adam, Mo, and of course Bobby for inviting me. But again, most importantly, I'm thankful to you for being present. My name is John. Most people refer to me as Brother John because I'm a motivational speaker and mentor by profession. I'm also an entrepreneur, and I also have a job. I'm a native of New York City. I grew up in the Bronx. I'm an original hip-hop kid from the 80s. So all of the dancing and the hip-hop culture, I was a part of starting that process. I'm 48 years old, and again, I'm from the Bronx. I grew up as a latchkey kid in a single-parent family home. My mother worked. She went to FIT, and she also worked as an accountant and bookkeeper. And I pretty much adopted a family in the streets. I grew up attached and latched myself to negative role models, and eventually, because I was a child who was longing for a relationship with my father, I linked on to negative role models in the street. I became a drug dealer. I was involved in criminal and gang activity, which eventually led me into prison. And prior to this, when I was in school, I was an intelligent child who can do the work, but I didn't hold my interests. I didn't find anything with relation to myself in the work. I was an analytical thinker. I was a free thinker. And I felt that the curriculum in school at that time in the 80s and in the 70s did not speak to me or my experience. And I found some holes in some of the curriculum that I felt could be challenged. So school was a very uncomfortable place for me, and I wanted more. But anyway, a life in the streets of selling drugs and violence, criminality led me into prison, and I was in prison for 17 years, and so which is a long time. How old are you?
I'm 17.
17, see? I didn't even know that. That's not scripted. I didn't come with any notes. He wasn't placed here as a prop to say 17. That's just the magic of group activity. So, and thank you for disclosing that. I was released in 2010 on May 7th, which ironically is my mother's birthday. It wasn't planned. That was also not scripted. You know, it just kind of fell that. Whose birthday? That's your birthday?
That's my mother's.
That's your mother's birthday. Wow. Okay. So we got a lot of significance and a lot of magic and significance happening with this group. But that was a blessing. And this week is actually the week that I was released 8 years ago. So thank you. Thank you. So it's been a journey for these last 8 years. And I've been home, and I'm not going to I'll just let you ask the questions if you like of kind of how I made the transition. But, you know, the figure 8 is a number that signifies transition from one circle to the next, and then both are intertwined. So where you are today, you'll be 8 years from now someplace else. And try to project for your life 5, 10, 20 years from where you want to be from one circle of existence into the other. So with that, that's enough as an opening. You can ask me anything you want. There's no question that I'm intimidated or don't feel the need to disclose. I'm open here to help and to guide, inspire, inform. If anyone has a question. I see two. I saw a hand there.
Zaire, and then I'll just write down the rest.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well.
How did you become a motivational speaker?
How did I become a motivational speaker? It started off in prison. Actually, no. It started off as a child. I would always see myself before a crowd of people, and I thought that I was going to be a singer, you know. But I just can't. I can't sing. So you know how when you're young and you have the brush or your thumb or whatever, and you're in the mirror and you know. And I tried to rap a little bit. My brother and I were involved in the hip hop community, and we had our own groups as children. And he wound up actually going further than I. He made a record in the '80s. I was part influential with it, but he actually made the record. So that didn't work for me. But when I went to prison, I began to speak in different classes, therapeutic classes, and I became a facilitator in different groups and classes, and to the point where the instructors and the teachers who were certified and credentialed would actually allow me to run the class because of my ability to grasp the information and make it relatable to the population or to the audience that I'm speaking to. So from that, it just became something natural that I do, and when I came home and was released, I decided that I wanted to give back to the community from what I call the treasure chest of my experience, and the rest is history. So I've been pretty much around this country, as far as Hawaii, speaking to different groups, drug programs, schools. In fact, I have to speak at a high school this Friday for Career Day, which is interesting. And shelters, prisons, it doesn't matter, whatever group I can, trauma groups. Sometimes it could be one-on-one, sometimes it's a group setting, but that's pretty much how I got started.
Alexa? JJ?
You called yourself an entrepreneur at the beginning, and I'm just kind of curious about what kind of business endeavors you've been through and what you're.
Well, I was a drug dealer, so that's where it started, right? I was. And I learned that being a drug dealer when I was very young, it was productive, but it wasn't positive. But the same skills, hard and soft, are applicable. So when I came home, I invested my money rather into something negative. I found something positive. I am a silent partner in a publishing company. We publish books of all type. It's called Asta Publications. And I also am a partner, kind of silent now, in a hair business called Cassini Beauty Bundles. Some of the young girls, they know about beauty bundles, of course. And, yes. And it's difficult for me as a salesman to promote the company because when you walk up to a female and present your product, it may be offensive to her because she may think you're insulting her, saying her hair needs to be done. So what I do is I just pretty much help out where I can, but I'm a partner and CEO in the company, and it's doing very well. And also I have a job working for a place called VIP Community Services, in which I'm a public educator for public health. And we go around New York City. Bobby works with us as well. He's in the back. He's not our driver. He's our medical transport specialist. That's the title. And we go all over New York City and we educate people on HIV, hepatitis, STIs. We also test people as well. So because I was gone for so long and my Social Security didn't look too well when I came home, I have to work, and I have two businesses. So that's what I do.
Melissa?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi.
Hi.
I was going to ask if you would mind telling us about your prison experience when you first went in and how you felt when you came back out.
Okay. How did I feel when I first? I did not want to be there. I didn't get caught. I actually turned myself in. Let me go back to the real question. The real question is, why were you in prison, right? That's what you really want to know. So the truth is, and I'm not proud of it, I took someone's life. Growing up in the streets and not understanding what's normal, because we think, as you know, in criminality, gang activity, that we're a subculture when in reality we're a counterculture. And we're taught not to call the police when something happens, right? Don't snitch and don't tell. So that was the culture. That was what was bred. That was what was inculcated into me. And as I grew into adulthood, I was 22 years old. My wife at the time, I lived in the Bronx, she was robbed at gunpoint in my building. And at the time, I didn't really respect women's intuition. A lot of times, most people in prison can relate to someone telling them not to go someplace, and it was always their mother, their sister. It's always a female, because y'all have that gift of, y'all know what I'm talking about? Where y'all can feel stuff before it happens, right? Okay. I know, fellas, I got all the ladies on my side right now, but I didn't respect women's intuition. And she wanted me to take, of course, this was way before the technological era we have now. We had VHS tapes back then. We rented videos, Blockbuster, and yes, this is way before your time. She wanted me to take the video back, and I would not take it back. And I don't know why she kept pressing me to do that, but she went to take it back, and on her way back from taking the videos back, she was robbed in the lobby of my building at gunpoint. And from that point on, I went downstairs, I retraced the person's steps, found out who it was from the streets, and I found out, and the word was out when he comes back to the block. I approached the gentleman the next day. He was armed, and I was armed. And we kind of got it going back and forth, and I stabbed him in his leg. And I didn't really want to kill him. I just wanted to hurt him, to teach him a lesson and make it a public example, not to rob my wife or any other woman in the community for that matter. And he bled to death because of the femoral artery. Now, I wasn't upstairs studying anatomy and Grey's Anatomy, and I didn't intentionally do that, but we don't have control. And I will say that the night prior, when she got robbed, my first statement was, I'm going to kill him. And like a lot of us do, we speak words that carry power and force and anger, just like we say, if you're hurting or you're injured or something is bothering you, we say things like, such and such is killing me. And I always tell people, don't say that, because you're giving power to that through your words. So that's what happened. I felt really, really bad about it. I ran for 5 months, and eventually, because I couldn't cope with living that way and what I did, I turned myself in. And when I say turn myself in, I want you to think of surrender, but I also turned myself within to really figure out how my life took on that kind of change, how I winded up in an environment like that, where I was inside of a cage, inside of a cage, inside of a cage, behind a fence, behind a wall. Isolated from society in an environment that's supposed to be therapeutic, but it was more about punishment. And I did not feel comfortable. I did not like what I saw. I did not like the culture of prison. And I made up my mind that I did not want that to be the rest of my life. I know I did not belong there. I did something wrong. I'm not a bad person. I just made some bad decisions. And I did not know as a youngster, as a teenager and a young adult, where I fit into society. So all of those struggles, all of that, all of those feelings of uncomfortability, insecurity, unsureness, and not knowing where I fit led to me actually committing that crime and being in prison. And at the end, from a lot of introspection, turning in, a lot of therapeutic study, a lot of self-analysis, self-correction, college education, higher education, intense study, and other things, I got to the point where I was more in tune and able to relate with the officers than I was with the prisoners. And it wasn't because I was a snitch. Just my mind was on living. Prison and criminality is about survival. A lot of men and women from what we call Uburbia. This is the Urban Academy, right? Uburbia is like suburbia. It's just an Ebonic term. But those from the inner city, from the ghetto, from the hood, we know how to survive. prison life, you know how to survive. But the difference is survival and living are two different things. And it's really not about survival is what I had to learn. I had to learn how to live. So I hope that answers your question. And I've been home 8 years now, living life on life terms. And I'm more successful now than I was when I was a drug dealer. I drive a very nice car. If you want to know, that's probably one of the next questions. It's a brand new BMW. I have two. And I'm saying that not to. I'm saying that I'm not promoting materialism. I'm saying that you can have whatever you want. You could accomplish whatever you want, and you could do it the right way. You don't have to hurt anybody. You don't have to break the law. You can picture in your mind and visualize whatever it is that you want and go out there and make it happen. I live in a nice home in Rockland County. I'm renting right now, but I'm looking to purchase a home that I own, that I can pass on, I can sell. It's an investment. So, and there's other things that I could share, but I'll just wait and see how the questions go.
We have some more on the list. Kasai?
Regret is an interesting word. Regret, remorse. I regret taking someone's life. I regret that. And I must say, I must apologize to all of you. As a former drug dealer, you know, your parents, pretty much my age, some of them. I have a son that's 30. I have a daughter that's almost 28, and I have a little 5-year-old. But whenever I interact with youth, I always keep in mind that as a former drug dealer, I don't know how I affected your parents or your friends' parents. And what I do know is that some of you have experienced, if not you, your friends, have experienced stuff that my generation has not experienced. And I speak to a lot of young men in prison, and when I get to talk to them and they tell me their history and how they grew up, and I always keep in mind that as a drug dealer, how did I affect his upbringing if his mother or his father was addicted to drugs? Am I responsible for that? I just wanted to put that out there in terms of the regret part of hurting people. But in terms of the experience and what I got from it, it humanized me. Being in prison helped me to learn that, again, there's a difference between being a bad person and making a bad decision or a bad choice. And when I went to the parole board the last time, because they didn't release me the first time, I said to them that they asked me pretty much the same question that you just asked. So I feel like I'm kind of on a parole board. It's just more faces looking at me when it's just a few. My response was this. I would describe, because I don't want to use the cliche term remorse or regret, but for me, if I could depict a picture, it felt like and feels like carrying a bag of bricks on your back. It's a burden. And rather than throwing the bag off, I tend to just take a brick a day and lay a brick down. And with each brick, and it's like a perpetual bag, no matter how many bricks, it just one keeps popping up. So it never goes away. But you take a brick a day and pave a pathway, a constructive pathway of healing and redemption for myself and for others. And that, again, segues into my motivational speaking. That's what fuels me. That's what empowers me to go and do what I do. So I once was a taker of lives. Now my job is to give life. I once was a vandal. Now I build the community. I help rather than destroy. I save and I nurture. So that's pretty much my mission, and it gives life to me. It keeps me smiling. Like Becky has a natural smile. Like she's, you know a fake smile, especially New Yorkers. You can't fool New Yorkers, right? So it gives me life. Does that answer your question? Anybody else? I can't see the person that's asking. Oh, there you are. Okay.
Hi. How did it feel like once you got out of like prison and stuff? How did it feel like coming out? Like as far as like how did the process of getting back on your feet?
Excellent question. It felt strange. I felt like I was born again. In fact, when I got out May 7th in the morning, the first thing that was weird was putting on clothes. Because again, I left in 1993, 94. So the styles were different. The clothing was different. And I had to kind of find where I fit in terms of, what to wear. My mother picked me up, and with my wife, who's now my ex-wife. And I got in a van, and I said, because I'm used to being transported, with cuffs inside of a big bus in the back. Everybody all right? So now I'm sitting in an SUV in the front, and from just all of the activity and just my central nervous system was overly stimulated, about maybe a half a mile from the facility, I got sick. I got dizzy, and I actually felt like I had to throw up. And I got out of the car, and I threw up, and I started to cry. Right? You figure it's hard criminal that just 17 years was crying. And I wasn't crying because I was happy to be out of the facility. I was crying because I realized the not just psychological effect, but the physiological effect that environment had on me, because it was just too much going on. I'm in the front seat of the car, and everything is coming real fast, and I'm looking at the cars, which look different, of course. It's like an apartment on wheels now versus what we had back in the early 90s. I went into a Super Kmart, and I'm looking at the vivid color patterns of cereal boxes and fruits, and I'm like, wow, it was just a lot for my central nervous system. So that's just one aspect. Socially, I felt kind of awkward. A lot of my friends were working for MTA, working as teachers and various other occupations. I had none. And I'm visiting their homes, and I'm seeing what they have, not just of material possessions, but families. And I felt so left behind, and I felt socially retarded. And I remember a friend of mine who's in Paris or Italy right now with his wife. He told me, don't worry, you'll get there. You'll get there. And 8 years later, I can say that I'm there, and I'm happy to be here. And it's a slow process, but you have to humble yourself, and you have to learn. I didn't know what email was. I remember I got my first job, and I didn't understand, if you are right next to me in a cubicle or an office, why the hell do you need to email me? Just tell me what you want. And I didn't get it. But I had to learn email etiquette, e-banking, just how to use a smartphone. And I got in trouble with a couple of smartphones. I would say I'm in one place, and I'd be someplace else, and then I would get a text that said, you are pinged, Mr. at such and such, so stop line. I just had to get it together. So it took some time. Even working, when I got into confrontations on the job and disagreements, I didn't understand the process. And I had to learn that you can't approach situations from a prison paradigm. There's a different standard of rules and social etiquettes that don't fit in this society, that only fit in that counter or subculture. So it was a process, and I'm thankful that I've had no police activity, no police arrests, nothing of the sort, and I've been home and been successful for the last 8 years. And the most important thing is, I have no desire to go backward. I have no desire to hurt anyone. I have no desire. It's not about me going back to prison. A lot of people make the mistake and say, you have to let me go at the parole board because I don't want to do any more prison time, or my family, it was rough for them. What happens is you make yourself the victim when you were actually the victimizer. And if you can't acknowledge that you were the victimizer, you're not ready to be released. Very, very important for the individual, not for not for what's on paper. It's important for you as an individual to make that transition and have that paradigm shift in your thinking.
Matthew?
What were your thoughts on prison before you went, and did it change after you left?
Thoughts on prison before and after. Excellent question. I really didn't think too much about it. I just remember a lot of guys coming home, big and swollen, doing pull-ups on the cross, the don't walk sign, and they would always brush their hair, trying to get waves, wearing where's the brother with the do-rag? They look like they had the do-rag on. Not a stereotype. Not a stereotype. But see, he's cool because he's so comfortable in his skin. He could wear a pink one, right? Guys wouldn't do that. See? That's a sign of being secure. I didn't really give it much thought because it wasn't my reality. And I always said, I'm not going to prison. Oh, you jailed out guys coming home. But until I was in that situation. And I had a couple of scrimmages, with the law. I'm locked up for 24 hours and released. But I never had that, I'm going upstate, to do a hard time. But once that reality set in, I had no choice. And there's 5 stages of any crisis situation. I think the first goes back and forth between denial and anger. And I go through this now when I test people for HIV and Hep C. You see the same process. Denial and anger is usually the first thing. What do you mean? Or I'm going to kill her. Or, test me again, right? So with getting arrested, it's the same thing, denial and anger. And then after a while, once denial and anger subsides, you deal with depression and bargaining. And you want to pray and get on your knees and ask to get out of this situation. You get depressed. But the last and most important stage is acceptance. Who said it? Who said it? Acceptance. That's right. And that's if on the counseling side, you have to get people to the point of acceptance. But for self, I had to reach that stage. So once I accepted my reality, then I accepted the fact that I had to change this because I have to find a way to break out of prison. Not physically, but I had to get out of prison here because I was already locked up before I was locked up. And that was the point in which I was able to make the change. So now, I don't view prison the way I did at first. I was very angry. In fact, when I go back to the prisons now, I tell all of the gentlemen to bring their photo album with them and look at their first picture that they took. And you see they look very angry, very serious. And then as time goes by and they buy sweatsuits and they're in the yard flicking it up like this and, they learn how to what they call bid. And I say to them that that's the point where you lost your mind because this becomes home and the streets become something that you don't know. You've learned how to do this. You've learned how to survive, but you have to learn how to live. So I view prison as warehouses. A prison industrial complex is a subject I think that's worth studying. And there are beds and prison cages prepared for every one of you in this room. Right now. It's waiting for you. It's there for you and your children. And the interesting thing, it costs more to incarcerate you than it does to educate you. And that's not about color, just like HIV. It's not about gender. There is a conspiracy afoot to warehouse people and make money on it. It's part of the stock market. And I'm not here to get into the whole politics and the legislator and all of that, but it's a reality. And just the thought of men and women doing 25 and 50 to life, in the next 20 years, you'll have a population of older men and women in those structured environments that are not equipped to handle a geriatric population. So it's really something to think about. There's something to study. And the history of the penitentiary or the prison system or corrections went from penitentiary, to reformatory to corrections. Penitentiary comes from the word penitence, where they would lock human beings up for 23 hours a day with 1 hour of recreation, and you would have nothing in the cell but a Bible, and they would hope that the act of penitence or remorse or regret would take place, but that's not what happened. It moved to reformatory, where you would have what they called indeterminate sentencing, and you would do time based on how well you did, and then you'd be released. And now the notion is corrections, which is supposed to be rehabilitation through programming, but it's more about punishment and isolation. So there are some higher educational programs and other therapeutic classes that are there, but it's not the kind of mindset and structure like what I see here. Walking into this facility, into this high school, I almost said facility. It is a facility in a sense. The first thing I noticed was the lack of security. Obvious security, but the more I walked around, I felt a sense of security. Not security in terms of uniform, wands, but just an atmosphere of learning. And when I went upstairs and I saw the couches and I'm looking around, the office where you're in really threw me because I never saw such a cluttered office before in high school. It's like, is this it? But then I looked at all the art on the wall and I looked at the couches and I watched you guys eat lunch. I'm looking at dress codes and I'm like, wow. It reminds me of the TV show Fame. I said this to Adam earlier. And I don't know if anybody know about Fame. Those who are my age know what I'm talking about. But it's really, I'm really impressed with this environment and the energy. So we can get back to the questions about prison and life, if there are any more.
Billy.
Yeah, this is actually kind of about the prison system.
Can you speak up, Billy?
A lot of times when people do something or have a traumatic experience, they tend to punish themselves. So it's not even about getting sentenced somewhere, they just kind of do it to themselves, even if they're not caught. So while you're talking about the problems with the prison system, would you rather have your own punishment after your own traumatic experience be more of a therapeutic one, or do you think the prison system serves as the punishment that people inflict onto themselves? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
That's an excellent question. There's a concept that I do a lot of workshops on. It's called hurt people. Bottom line. So if you're hurting, then it's easy for you to hurt someone else. So what I believe is that, again, I don't really believe that I don't believe in a person being no good. I believe that something made a person make no good decisions. And if we could peel away the onion skin layers and figure out what the unresolved childhood issues are, what the unresolved family issues are, what the insecurities are, what it is that make us feel uncomfortable in our own skin. Because growing up from first grade to high school was probably the most traumatic experience I've ever had. Because children can be very cruel. We tend to, you okay? Okay. We tend to be very disrespectful to each other. We used to call it snapping. I don't know what they call it now, cutting up. Or we make fun of each other's clothing. We make fun of each other's physical features. We make fun of each other's everything. And if you don't measure up or compare to what I have, if you're not wearing what this person, and all of that nonsense can really create deep-seated insecurities in a person. And I think if we attack that, then the behavior will change. So therapy is the answer. It's definitely the answer. And if you're in an environment that's talking therapy but it's not living it, then you miss some. There's going to be good apples, but most of the crop is not going to make it. So you have to have an environment that is about therapy. An environment itself has to be therapeutic. And every now and then there are anomalies that create the environment, or they carry their own atmosphere, or they just, the light comes on for them and they become leaders in their own right, and they begin to help people because they've had that shift, that therapeutic paradigm shift. And a lot of times when that happens, just like inventors and prophets and leaders and revolutionaries, they're kind of transferred and you don't see them anymore. So, but the process continues. Thank you for that question.
I think we should do a half thank you, and then a half people who want to continue. There's a long list, and John's willing to stay and talk to people more.
And I'm willing to come back if you want me to come back.
So thank you.
Thank you. Weren't they supposed to stay though for the raffle?
No, we decided not to do it because they were